Welcome to this lecture video, Understanding Project Management, a Practical Guide, Chapter 6, Budget Planning. Once again, the project life cycle, and we can see that we're working our way through the planning tasks, this time on budget planning. Two questions to ask, that is our agenda. How much will the project cost, and when will the project costs occur? Now, for the first question, how much will the project cost? Recall that during the initiating phase, the overall budget for the project was documented in the project charter. So one might think, well, okay, we're done. We know the cost of the project. Well, this isn't the case. This is the amount available, the amount that was budgeted for this work, but it doesn't necessarily mean what the project scope that was defined will actually end up costing. So during the planning phase, this amount, the cost, the budget needs to be refined and re-estimated based on the planning work that was done. We can't just rely on whatever was said in the project charter. That might not be reality. Costs may be direct costs. For example, salary costs that are for the team members involved, or they may be indirect costs. For example, the rent for the building, hydro costs, and so on, benefits, and those are indirect costs. There are various approaches to estimating costs, including analogous estimating. This is looking at a previous project for its costs and then extrapolating that to the current project. There is parametric estimating. This is where for certain types of costs, there are unit costs that are known, and then we can then determine the number of units that we will use. An example is the easiest to do. If you were planning a banquet and you were going to hire a caterer, they may say the per person or per plate cost is $30 per plate or person. Well, then you could easily calculate the estimated cost by saying, well, if it's $30 and we're going to have 100 people, that will result in $3,000. So it's multiplying the unit cost by the number that you estimate to use. And then there is another technique, which is bottom up, and that is to look at all of the work packages that were defined in the WBS and then develop cost estimates for each of these smaller pieces, which is a lot easier than doing the overall project. And then not that it's easy, but it's simpler to do that than the overall project. So then once you've calculated the or estimated the costs for each work package, you just add them up, and that becomes your overall cost estimates. There's advantages and disadvantages for each estimating approach. Analogous is fairly quick and easy. It's quick to do, doesn't take a whole lot of time. You can sort of size it based on a previous project. It can be something that is done early in the planning phase. However, its level of accuracy is not always the highest, in that it's sometimes difficult to completely be able to define the differences between things that have been done in the past. So it is not necessarily the most accurate way, but it is something that can be done quickly and early in the project. Parametric estimating is very useful in that it's very accurate as long as you have a good sense of the number of units that you will need. So it's very useful when it's available. However, it's not always available. Not every type of cost has a parametric unit cost. So that's its disadvantage. You can't use it all the time. Bottom up is the most accurate form of cost estimating. So that is one of its key advantages. Its disadvantages, it's fairly time consuming to do, and you can't do it until you're a little further along in planning. You need a well-defined work breakdown structure in order to perform an effective bottom-up estimate. So there advantages and disadvantages, and it's not an either or. You don't have to pick one or the other. Oftentimes in a project, an analogous estimate is done early to kind of stress test the project charter estimate. Parametric estimating is used when when possible or when appropriate. And eventually we should go to a bottom up estimate in order to, once we have that level of detail. So it's often an all-in type of approach when estimating costs. Okay, let's look at our first video in terms of creating the cost estimates.
For Sophie, creating the cost estimates is the trickiest part of the business. From past experience, she has learned that estimating too high can cause projects to be cancelled, but estimating too low can mean she will exceed her costs later. A guesstimate is simply not good enough. This time, Sophie feels confident. Thanks to her earlier work brainstorming and categorizing the work packages, she can now better assess the estimated costs of each work package and therefore, the overall project. Sophie decides that to perform this task, a change of scenery is in order. On the way to work, she pulls into the parking lot of her local coffee shop. After ordering a large coffee, she opens her laptop and looks at the project schedule. The majority of the costs for this project will come from the people working on the project in the form of their salaries. At Deco Productions, the finance department has calculated what is known as a loaded rate for employees who work on projects. This loaded rate is an hourly rate that not only includes their salaries but also reflects overhead costs, such as benefits, building costs, and office supplies. So far, 2 people have been assigned to the project, Sophie and Fatijit. While other team members have not yet been assigned to the project, based on the work involved, Sophie knows she will need the following resources. She considers the amount of work that will be required for each activity. For some activities, she uses her in-depth knowledge of the work involved, while for others, she considers past projects. She makes a quick call to one of the company's graphic designers to verify her estimates for the graphics-related work. Sophie also includes the cost of her own time and that of Fatijit, the business analyst, which she predicts will be spent during the executing phase. During the 5 weeks of execution, she estimates that about 1/3 of her time will be needed to manage the team, resolve issues, and communicate with the project stakeholders. She also estimates that she will need about 1 day per week of Fatijit's time to answer the project team's questions about the project scope and provide quality control for the completed deliverables. Next, Sophie creates a list that outlines the amount of materials and equipment the project will need. As she records this information, she checks the current price of each item by referring to a number of suppliers' websites. Finally, she considers any additional costs that may be incurred during the project. 1 hour, 1 large coffee, and 2 maple donuts later, Sophie has settled on a total cost estimate for the project and heads into work.
Okay, so in this video, we saw Sophie, the PM, primarily using a bottom-up approach to estimating the project costs. That was her main approach. She considers both human resources costs, the people time, and other costs such as materials and equipment. Her total estimate is $56,520. This is about $3,500, $3,480 under the total budget of $60,000 defined in the project charter. This is, good news. If it turned out that it was 66,000, this would be an issue that would need to be resolved, and this would be a discussion with the project sponsor. But it's better to understand. One of the advantages of cost planning is it's better to find that out now than to find it out at the end of the project when you can't do anything about it. If we were at 66,000, there are perhaps decisions that could be made in terms of the content of the project or the approach that we're taking and so on. But at this point, we're under budget, which is good news. This additional amount that we're under is known as our budget contingency. It's the extra amount that we have because sometimes costs will increase past our estimates. Remember, they're just estimates, so the costs might actually increase. So we have about $3,500 of contingency, which is very useful. You can see the cost estimates document for the case study in the textbook, chapter 6. And key idea: develop cost estimates for the human resources, materials, equipment, and other requirements. Now, when will the project costs occur? It's not enough just to know what the estimated costs are, but also when will they likely occur. Now, the cost information contained in the cost estimates document is combined with the project schedule information contained in the project schedule. This allows us to create a detailed budget. Let's look at the process that takes place to create the detailed budget.
Sophie reviews the total cost estimate of the project. She is relieved that it is less than the $60,000 budget, giving her a small contingency fund. However, she also knows from experience that costs often are higher than estimated and that they will need to be managed closely throughout the project. To do so, in addition to the amount of the estimated costs, she will need to know when they are planned to occur. For example, if $30,000 is spent by the halfway point of the project, does this mean that the project will meet its budget? What if more of the costs will be incurred near the end of the project? This could indicate that the project will be over budget. Opening her laptop, Sophie creates a spreadsheet. For each row, she lists an activity of the project. For each column, she lists a week of the project. Sophie focuses first on the human resource costs. Using the project schedule and the planned costs that are contained in the detailed estimates, she begins to fill in the cells of the spreadsheet. For example, for the week ending March 27th, her calculations would be as follows. The initiate the project activity is planned to start and finish in 3 days. The project manager, Sophie, plans to spend 50% of her time on this activity. Because her daily rate is $800, this results in a total planned cost of $1,200. This amount is placed under the March 27th column. The first 2 days of the project activity are also planned to start during this week. There are 2 resources assigned to this activity, 50% of the project manager's time and 100% of the business analyst's time. This results in a total planned cost of $2,080. Sophie continues to calculate the planned cost for each of the remaining 7 weeks of the project schedule. Next, she considers the other non-HR costs and determines when these costs will likely occur. Based on the schedule, the banner stands will be ordered during the week ending April 10th. The cards during the week ending April 17th. And the cameras and tripods during the week ending April 24th. Material costs for the murals will occur during the week ending April 17th. Sophie inserts a row for each of these. Once complete, she double-checks her work to ensure that the total cost in her new spreadsheet, $56,520, matches the total of the cost estimates she developed earlier. Once the planned costs for all weeks are calculated, the detailed budget is complete.
Okay, so what we saw there is Sophie deciding to organize the detailed budget by project phase, and then within each phase, list the human resources costs and other costs. So the level of detail that can be contained in a detailed budget may vary. Sometimes it's very detailed, sometimes it's very summary. It really depends upon the reporting needs and the cost needs of the stakeholders of the project. Using her cost estimates and project schedule, she calculates the planned cost for each week of the project. Detailed budgets are normally produced and on a monthly basis. The time frame is usually monthly. Because the case study project is fairly short, it's only 8 weeks or effectively kind of 2 months. A weekly detailed budget is shown. A monthly one will also be shown as well. So you can see the detailed budget weekly for the case study in the textbook, chapter 6. Again, the level of detail in the detailed budget, the breakdown of cost, number of time periods, again, depends on the project. Projects with higher budgets often require a more detailed breakdown of costs than smaller, simpler projects. So it really depends upon the reporting needs. The duration of the time periods usually depends on the overall duration of the project. So projects that are only, a month or two might have a weekly time periods versus longer projects, 6 months, 12 months in total duration will likely have monthly time periods within the detailed budget. So you can see the detailed budget on a monthly basis for the case study in the textbook, chapter 6. Now, why do we create a detailed budget? There's a lot of, the video and the textbook will describe a fairly intense work to create a detailed budget. And some of the two main advantages is that one is it assists in the management of the costs for the project. If you don't know when the costs will occur, if you don't know the likely time the costs will occur, you'll have difficulty monitoring the costs as the project is underway. Um, our assumption sometimes is that costs are evenly distributed throughout a project, and that's often not the case. Sometimes the costs are more earlier in the project, sometimes they're later in the project. So if you understand when the costs are likely to occur, you can then better manage the costs as you start to spend money during the project. So it's key for the effective management of the cost aspects of the project. The other advantage is for cash flow, is to understand when the project is going to spend money, because organizations, the chief financial officer, accountant for the organization needs to know this information so that the funds may be available. So it's for cash flow purposes. So key idea, create a detailed budget that shows the distribution of estimated costs over the timeline of the project. The new terms that are present in this chapter, you can see the key terminology section. Here are the references, and thanks for watching.